In this session, we will be looking at Kerberos for database authentication. Kerberos will be used in this case for users that are created in the database with the clause identified externally. In a later session, we will look at centrally managed users, and there we have users identified globally. But the first step is looking at Kerberos. So Kerberos can be quite challenging to set up, and that's the reason I created this presentation in video. Because if you follow the right steps, then it becomes much easier. First of all, let's look at the flow in Kerberos. So what is the actual flow of authentication requests and tickets going around? The initial request will be sent to the authentication service. So the authentication service is included in the Windows authentication flow already. There we are authenticating with the KDC of Windows. And for Linux distributions, to get the ticket granting ticket, as it is called, we use the command kinit. So the authentication request is sent in plain text to the authentication service of the KDC. Then the username and password will be verified. So the credentials will be verified by the AS. And the AS, if it finds the credentials correct, sends the TGT, so the ticket granting ticket, plus a session key. And that session key will be used for encrypted communication. And the TGT is stored in credential cache on the client system, either on file system or in memory. The next step is that the client asks for a service ticket from the ticket granting service, which is also part of the KDC. And this request is accompanied by the TGT and that was sent before by the authentication service. That will be checked by the ticket granted service, and if it can authenticate the client, it sends the credentials and a ticket, so a service ticket to access the requested service back to the client. Then the access to the database is requested. The client sends the service ticket to the RDBMS, and that will use this ticket to verify the identity of the user, and this establishes the connection. So this is the flow of Kerberos. And for setup, first we have to configure the so-called krb5.conf file. And here I show part of the manual page for krb5.conf. And at the bottom you see the most important parts for database authentication using Kerberos: libdefaults section, the realms section, and the domain underscore realm section. The libdefaults is some default settings for the Kerberos library. In the realms part, you will specify where the KDC lives for your Kerberos realm. And in the domain underscore realm part, and that is where oftentimes misconfiguration is happening. There we map the domain name of the server, so the database server domain name, or host names to Kerberos realms. And how does it look like? Here you see my realm is called bordora.nl, and in Kerberos the realms are always in uppercase. There is a realms section where you see the domain. So my default realm, bordora.nl, and where do we communicate to the KDC? That is on port 88 to my host dc1.bordora.nl. The admin server, you can skip that part for Kerberos authentication, but for completeness, I have edited this as well. Then the next session, so the final session, is domain_realm, so the mapping of the host name or the host domain to a realm. And here my domain is .bordora.nl, so in lowercase. If I type in hostname -f on any of my hosts, the last part of the hostname will be .bordora.nl in lowercase. And that maps to the realm in capitals again, bordora.nl. Then we can verify if that works. For this, we can either use the default admin user in kinit, but here I already added a user to Active Directory, and kinit fborden provide, and you see that automatically the realm is added to that kinit prompt for the password. So that is the first check that you can do if you're on the right track. And then after the authentication, klist will show the TGT, yeah, the ticket granting ticket. So that is the first part. And then we are going to look at what is called a service principal. For this, the identification of a service principal in Active Directory consists of three parts. The first one is the K-service. This is what we later on see in our SQLnet.ora. And to distinguish between services, so database services and hosts, I always use host name or the service name combined with the host name. The K instance is for the database server, the host name -f output, so the fully qualified domain name of the database server where the database runs. And this is also where oftentimes mistakes are made. Don't put in the scan listener name and the domain name of the scan listener, just the domain name of the host where your database instance is running. And the final part is again the realm in capitals. This is the Kerberos realm. Yeah, the user in Active Directory needs to be created. In my case, I have a service called hrprod, and my host name without the domain name is dbnode. So I use that as a username in Active Directory. Kerberos des, uncheck that in the Active Directory admin tool. And also make sure that AES 128 and AES 256 bit are checked. We will use 256, so 128 could also be unchecked. And the next part is Kerberos pre-authentication for that user. It needs to be not required. Then on the KDC, we create a keytab file, and that keytab file stores the credentials and the certificate for TLS communication. And it can be created on the KDC as stated with the command ktpass, and there you will find the minus principal where we have the information from the previous slide. So my service, my fully qualified domain name, and the realm. I use all crypto in this case. And you provide the password for that user, and you map the principal to the user in Active Directory. And the output of this will be your keytab file, and that keytab file you will transfer to the database node, and it's only required on the database node. Then to verify if KTPass was successful in Active Directory for that user, you will find that the account name field has been changed to the value for the minus principal. And it will not show the realm part in there. So the principal will be service slash and then the FQDN. Then on the database side, there you will have to set 3 initialization parameters. One is the LDAP underscore directory access. Set that to password. The OS authentication prefix needs to be nil, and remote OS authent equals false. Then on the database side, SQLnet.ora. So for your database instance, go to your TNS admin directory and change the SQLnet.ora. The authentication service is going to be bequeath and Kerberos 5. SQLnet Kerberos conf file that will point to your kerb5.conf that we showed earlier, and the Kerberos 5 conf mit MIT equals true. You can also add fallback authentication in case Kerberos fails, that it falls back to password authentication. And then on the database side, there we need to point to the service. So the authentication underscore Kerberos 5 underscore service is the service name in Active Directory. So in my case, hrprod-db node, and the keytab file. So the keytab file that we created on the KDC with the ktpass command. And then in the database, we create a user identified externally. So the externally is the same name as we saw in the klist command. And grant create session, of course. And then to check kinit fborden, in this case, provide the password and then log on to the database. Yeah, so that is the steps that are needed for Kerberos for external authentication. now I will show that in a demo environment. Here I'm going to go to, so let's stop this one. And here I have two terminal windows. On the left-hand side, I will show sort of my client side, and on the right-hand side, my server side. So let's first go to the database host, one of the database hosts. Here we set the environment, and then let's first have a look at my kerb5.conf. In this case, my domain name, this is different than what I showed in the slides. Here you see that this domain name is subnet in oraclevcn.com. Yeah, so here the realms part is the same. I will show another example on the left window in a moment, but this is important. Here the realm is bordora.nl because there we point to our KDC, and the domain to realm mapping needs to have the domain name map to the realm. Yeah, so that is the first part. My initialization parameters are set already, and if I go to my Oracle Home network admin directory, and there will be a lot of extra information, but what we are looking for is this part. So because I use it also as a client, here I have the cache name. But for a pure server side where you're not going to log on as a client for Kerberos, then you don't need this entry. The server side, this is only needed on the server side, so I should have moved this to here. But we have our authentication services. We have the authentication Kerberos service. That is the Active Directory user and the service principal. And there we point to the kerb5.conf, MIT equals true, and the key tab file. Yeah, so that is the server side. Then on my client side, if I look here, I have the client is the TNS admin is this path. So here, if I look at my SQLnet.ora, again, this is also a database host. So don't look at the service, because now I'm going to use it only as a client, and then it needs only the authentication services, the fallback authentication, in this case, Kerberos 5conf. This one, ClockSkew. If you don't have NTP, then ClockSkew can play a role. I have set it to quite a high value. And this is client side only. And if you don't specify it, it will default to /tmp and then krb5cc underscore and the ID of the user. So my Oracle user has Linux ID 1000. That is how that works. And these are not needed for my client side. But if I now, let's first make sure that the cache is not there. And now if I kinit fporden, and let's copy the password. Now if I do klist, it will show my TGT, so the ticket, granting ticket. And next, when I connect, for instance, to that database sec host on the right-hand side, now I'm connected. If I type in show user, it will show that I'm connected as F. Borden. And when I log out again, we also see that we have a session ticket now. Yeah, for this DB sec host and then the fully qualified domain name at Realm. Yeah, so that is how that works. Let's look at the klist when we connect to another database. So here also I can do this. This is connecting to the database that runs on this host, the DB node host. So that, of course, also works. And now if I do a klist, I see that I have a second session ticket, uh, and that is for my FBDB-DB node. Final demo, I will log out and clear this screen. We don't need this as well. And now on my MacBook, I can do the same. Let's show my cache is non-existent, but if I do kinit here and I take the same password, so here I have also my krb5.conf. I should have shown that before, but here I have both domain to realm mappings for the bordora.nl domain and also for the OCI domain. And now what I can do in SQL Developer, so I will move to SQL Developer, and here I will show you first the properties of this user. Here you see that I have specified Kerberos authentication, no username and password, of course. This is the IP address and the internal IP address and my service name. And if I connect there, it will show. Yeah, it will connect. And if I open SQL, then I can, the user equals F Borden as expected. That concludes the demo.